Welcome back to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions podcast. I'm your host, Graham Richmond, and today we have an absolute treat for our listeners. We are sitting down with Michael Robinson from Columbia Business School. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And Michael, for those of you who don't know, is the Director of Admissions at Columbia. And I want to give a quick bio on you, Michael, just so that our listeners who don't know you well can get kind of a basic background. So in addition to being Director of Admissions at Columbia, you also have an MBA from the school. You graduated in 2001 and have been with the school pretty much ever since. I did want to point out a couple of really interesting kind of tidbits on your background, aside from being, a real presence at the school and having been there for many years now. You originally, I guess, were born in Canada, grew up in Jamaica, and then immigrated to the U.S. as a teenager, which is just a fascinating trajectory. And I also noted that it says you're a bit of a 90s hip hop guy. So I'm sure we could do a whole podcast about that alone because I love hip hop. And one question I had for you, does 90s hip hop include like BDP, or is that kind of pre-90s? Because I always wonder like where the line is.
I say that's pre-90s, but
okay.
That's part of the canon. That's important.
Yes, it's definitely part of the canon. Okay, all right, good.
And BDP, that's important to me.
Okay, good. And then the other thing I think I should mention is that I guess you do a lot of work around Columbia Business School's kind of diversity initiatives, and even it sounds like even in your personal life, you're a mentor and informal advisor to women and young people of color. So I wanted to mention that too, because I think that's a big, important part of the work that you're doing. And I guess I also read that you've kind of worked really hard to expand the business school's presence in Africa and Southeast Asia. So does that mean you're spending a fair amount of time in those regions of the world too?
Yes. I travel to the continent pretty much every year for the past decade. And for the last 4 years, I've been doing at least one trip to Southeast Asia and did the first trips to Vietnam that the school did in a number of years. And to me, this is linked to the conversation about hip hop because it is, right? Because as a young person of color growing up in Queens, New York, and so on, and seeing these kids breakdance and make this art form, so when Run DMC spoke about Hollis, when LL Cool J spoke about Farmers Boulevard and so on, I lived in Hollis, I could walk to Farmers Boulevard in 7 minutes. So they were talking about where you were from, right? So someone's narrative, someone's story has always been very important to me. And then the other thing in terms of the DEI work, which is connected, is that many of the creators of this art form were locked out of real significant opportunity. And if you're a person 14, 15, 16, and you believe that the only way for me to make it is as an athlete or as a rap star, then that's a dream that so few can attain. So how do we really broaden access to people in a way that's meaningful? Because talent is something that's broadly distributed, but access to opportunity is something that's very narrow. And one of the things that when you travel is that you find that in every country, there is some group that is marginalized for some reason. Sometimes you're the wrong race. Sometimes you're the wrong gender. Sometimes you pray to the wrong God. Sometimes you love the wrong person according to some power that be, right? And to me, real DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is trying to build systems that tend to offset that. So everyone feels that they had a shot. So hip hop it starts with hip hop for me.
My exposure to hip hop was, I grew up in a kind of sheltered environment in like New Jersey and went to a summer camp that for some reason was largely populated by kids from New York City, places like Queens and Brooklyn. So my exposure to all that stuff came from those kids because I was growing up in the country. It was kind of country mouse meets city mouse, and I got exposure to it. So for me, Farmers Boulevard and Hollis, they were just these like mythical kind of places that I had never really seen, right? So
that was like less than 10 minutes for me. I could walk there.
That's excellent.
I grew up in Hollis, so that was home.
Excellent. So let's dive in. I know that, the listeners of the podcast, as you're well aware, are, looking at business school and often the very top business schools. So they're very interested in Columbia. Columbia has this tremendous advantage of being in New York City, which puts it on almost everyone's list as kind of a target to consider for application. But the first question I had for you is I just was kind of curious to know, how did you end up in this role at Columbia? You did your MBA there, so obviously that put you in proximity. You've been through the admissions process yourself. But how did you end up in this role that you're in today?
I literally call it the recession of 2001. So the reality is that there are very few 5-year-old kids who say I want to do MBA admissions when I grow up, right? So that wasn't my story. That wasn't my narrative. So I was working in the music business at the time when I started business school, and thought I would kind of transition to maybe media consulting, something that had some sort of media or entertainment connection, and the economy went in a different place. So I was looking around for an opportunity. I was doing biz dev at Panasonic for a bit, got laid off at the end of 2001, and then I said, I'm smart, I'll find something else. But a couple of months went by, and I was like, So my initial thought was that I would just, take this opportunity at the business school because I love the experience at Columbia, and figured that it would be like a very short, maybe 1 to 2 year thing until the market rebounded. Then I'd figure out the next phase. And it's been 17 and a half years.
Yeah, really interesting. And you and I both graduated from business school in 2001, so I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of how the economy was at that moment. But clearly, so you've been there a while. So tell me, what is it that you like about this job?
I like and love the people that I interact with. So if you think about the world that we live in, everything is so partisan, right? Nationalism is on the rise. So there's so much pessimism. But in the job and the role that I have, I get to talk with young people who are smart, driven, accomplished, and they're filled with hope, optimism, and they really want to make their portion of the world a better place. And they think an MBA is an important step in them achieving their goals on that journey. So it makes me feel really good. And then the thing is that when you tend to travel to dozens of countries over time, and you get to talk to talented people with very different backgrounds from very different countries, you find that there's a lot about the human race that is so similar, in that we want to make our portion of the world a better place. We want to make lives better for our children and our families and so on. And that's very common across all groups. So it gives me hope despite all the noise that you see around us.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, that's kind of why, I think why we here at Clear Admit do what we do. We really love interacting with people. And I was looking the other day, this podcast is listened to by people in Senegal and Cote d'Ivoire and Tanzania. It's just amazing to see that all around the world there are these young professionals who have these kinds of hopes and dreams to do amazing things, and using kind of, graduate management education as a vehicle for that. So absolutely understand where you're coming from there. So now I have to ask the kind of counterpoint. What do you dislike about your job?
Same answer, the people. But thankfully this is a much, much smaller group. So people who are overly transactional. So, and by that I mean, you have something that I want, a job opportunity, a spot in an MBA program or something. So I'm going to pretend to be nice to you. I'm going to pretend to be a good person until I extract that value. And then once I extract that value, I'm on to the next person, So from time to time, you run into people like that. And if you admit 700 people within to build your class, you will always have people like that. I call them mistakes. Because sometimes people can slip through the process, but that is the person that I don't like. And that's but that's part of life.
Yeah, yeah. Understandable. I mean, I think we always talk about how I sometimes feel like the MBA crowd, there's like the portion of the applicant pool that forgets that they're actually applying to spend 2 years learning something. It's almost like there's a piece of the crowd that you feel like if you could go to them and say, hey, you know what, just pay us the tuition, we'll give you the degree, put it on your resume, you don't have to come. There's like a small percentage, thankfully it's very small, that would say, okay, great deal, I'm taking that. And I feel like, my time in business school was just really eye-opening and educational. And I think, yeah, people need to remember that. So give me a CBS stereotype that you would like to debunk.
It has no community, that people are overly transactional, and that's all you see. So you don't really get this sense of fellowship between the people who are on campus. And I think that's the biggest stereotype and myth that we try to debunk. And the reality, right, is that like within our application process, one of the key things, I mean, if you speak to people who are outside of our process, they believe like Columbia, they're like so fixated on yield, right? But that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is that like we want people who have been thoughtful about the process, know who we are, and have a real sense of what they're going to contribute to Columbia. So they know what they're going to add to the community. So we're looking for that. So we're trying to find folks who are going to add value to the community all the time. So that's a core thing for us.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think that that's fair in the sense that you do hear people talking about, oh, Columbia's in New York, so it's kind of a busy environment, and it's not like one of these rural, MBA programs that.
That it is. It really is busy. It is definitely not rural. And in
Right.
fact, like
Right.
I have this stock joke where I say like if you're at Columbia and you see like a deer crossing the street, run, because something bad is going to happen. You should not see deer or cows.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So if you see one, run. Just run. Don't think, just run.
So tell me, I have a feeling that I feel like I know what you're going to say with this, but I'm curious to know about something new that's happening or forthcoming on campus that you wish people knew more about.
So there are a couple of things. So we're excited about our new building, so
I knew it. Yeah, I knew that's where you're going to go.
that's
Yeah.
one thing. And the fact is that like anyone who applies from now on will actually finish their program in the new building. So Henry Kravis is one of the biggest sponsors. We'll have 2 new buildings. The price tag is north of $500 million, by a world-class designer and so on, and architect. So it's beautiful. And there are renditions online that people can look at. The idea is that it's going to be a space that's going to allow for greater collaboration and so on. And the reality is that like we'll all be in the same physical place. Just to give you some context, we have the main campus in Uris and in Uris Hall, which is part of the main Columbia University campus, right? But there are offices as far south as 60th Street, and the school would be the equivalent of 120th Street, right? So literally people who work for the school are 60 blocks away. So we want and need to be together, and come January 2022, we all will be together.
Yeah, and I think I just want to mention, in case our listeners don't know, it's actually it's not just a new building or buildings, but it's a new campus, right? I mean, this is a separate, and where is the campus? It's sort of, it's not too far, but it's like literally, it's its own thing, right? I mean, you're going to have your own space.
So it's going to be like north of 125th and further west to the river. So it's the new Manhattanville campus, and there's going to be a suite of professional schools up there as well. So the business school is one of the first schools to move there.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm personally excited for this because it's been like a long time in the works, and I think that's going to be game changing. And I encourage people to look online at these renderings and stuff because it's really amazing.
And there are 2 more things that I want to add, right? Because we also have a new dean, Dean Costas McLaris, and he has been at the forefront for all things digital at Columbia, and literally has been working really hard to build out the curriculum for those interested in technology. And he believes very strongly that data science is becoming as important as management science. right? So the leaders of the future need to be better equipped to have careers that will involve the digital future all across industries. So that's one thing, right? So he's been doing that for a number of years, and he became dean, like just this past summer. So he's leading those efforts now. So he is the person that will lead us to the promised land, so to speak.
Okay. And then what was the other thing? You said there were two more things.
And the third thing is that last year we launched a deferred enrollment program. So if you know any super smart college seniors who are mature, who, have their act together, despite the fact that they're 21 or 22, and they can apply to us as a college senior, there's no application fee. And then you have 2 to 5 years to matriculate to the program.
Wow, that's great.
So we're excited about that. But the thing I want to say though is that like I smile when I say this, because when I was 22, I was one step above a knucklehead. So I just that like I would not have been ready to apply to business school like at 22. But we all know that person who, they've always been really proactive at planning out their lives and all that kind of stuff, so by the time I'm 23, I'm going to do that, like we all know that person, right? And that person is ready. And the thing I also want to say though, right, is that if you speak to current students or alumni, they've always said that you learn, or they learn just as much from their classmates as their professors. So that can't change, right? So it's more about like you're admitting Kobe Bryant from high school who's ready for the MBA, despite the fact that they're in high school. So is that kind of person where you don't have as much data points because you don't have 3 to 5 years of experience as with a typical applicant. So it's more predictive, so to speak, in terms of like, taking a chance at someone and then trying to figure out, despite having fewer data points, which young person is deserving of this opportunity, and they're going to be super ready to contribute when they return in 2 to 5 years.
The Clear Admit MBA Admissions podcast is brought to you by the evening and weekend program at the Kellogg School of Management. Reach your highest career goals while earning an MBA part-time. The evening and weekend MBA program at the Kellogg School of Management, conveniently located at their downtown Chicago campus, offers flexible study options to fit your lifestyle and match your experience. By graduation, you'll share the same toolkit, skills, and network as the school's most prominent alumni. Visit kellogg.northwestern.edu/EW to learn more. That makes sense. And I think, we've seen a lot of largely the sort of top MBA programs offering these types of deferred admissions options, and it's great to that you guys are coming online with it. And I think I feel like it resonates with this generation in the way that I like you. I was not super planned out when I was graduating from college. I knew that I wanted to not be in school anymore. That was about it. But I think I think it resonates, and the idea that I remember actually when I told my parents that I was thinking about business school. And I was working, and they're like, "Oh, you're not going back to school. What are the chances of that?" It was this idea that once you went out into the real world, you wouldn't come back. So I think, being able to sort of lock that in as an undergraduate and know, okay, I'm going to go out and work for a couple of years, but I have a plan, is really, really appealing. So, but you're right. I think it sounds like it raises some interesting questions about how you go about evaluating, and this idea that it's a bit more predictive, and that's actually a great segue into the next question I had for you, which was about the life of an application. And I was curious if you could just sort of walk me through, what happens, so someone submits their application, what goes on the back end in terms of how you and your team, review files, et cetera, until the candidate, is basically, accepted. So what happens to this? What is the process?
In our office, our team is kind of split into 2 parts. An operations team that basically follows the path of an application, right? So you submit, and then there's a team that checks do we have everything? Do we have the so let's assume that we have a complete application. So we'll just give a couple steps. So then once the application is complete, then typically you're assigned to a junior reader, someone who's newer on our team, and then they make an assessment, and then that goes to someone who is more senior and so on, and then that person it eventually gets to the number two person in our office, Robert Shea, to give you a name, and then Bob literally decides, okay, well, do we go further? Do we actually interview this person or not? And we typically, depending on the volume of applications, are interviewing, I'd say, between 35 to 40 to maybe 45% in a down year of the applicant pool. And then typically half, approximately, of the folks that we interview get admitted, right? So there's multiple review, and then once you basically get to the interview stage and so on, most of our interviews are done by alums in the city where you're based, right? And then we ask the alum to turn that around literally within 2 days, 48 hours. And then once we have the completed report from the alumni interviewer, we will basically give you a final decision within 2 weeks of that interview. So most of our, between us getting a complete application, most people get either an interview decision or a final decision, I would say between like 3.5 to 6 weeks. Sometimes their processes are a little bit longer and so on, but I would say that over 90% of all our applicants basically get some sort of final result within a close to 4 to 6, 7 week period.
Okay. Which makes you guys very fast compared to, well, I mean, it depends, but because, you guys are a little unique in that it's more of a rolling process. But I think, that's a really nice turnaround. One question I had was, is there a normal or kind of an average number of reads that a file would get before the interview, before Bob is making that decision? Like, I know when I worked in admissions at Wharton, we would have at least 2 people read the file, and if they were in agreement about an interview, then the candidate would be given an interview. But if they weren't, then there would be like a tie-breaking read, or yeah. So is it similar? Or?
It depends, right? But sometimes Bob is 2, sometimes Bob is 3. So, for example, say I was the person who was doing that second review, because I've been here a long time and so on, then then you can literally can skip a step.
Right. Okay. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So we have younger staff, and then the person that they report to is taking like a second look at what they're doing and so on, and then that person is pushing it up the pole a bit.
Okay, that makes sense. And then once the interview report comes back in, is it done in a way where you guys meet as a committee to talk, or is it just that there's a third or fourth reader that comes in, reads it?
There's a committee. I mean, and the committee could be like, I mean, most committees are like, like Amanda Carlson, who's the dean of admissions, Robert Shea is number 2 person in our office, and then other people who are in the office. But they're the drivers of most committee meetings, right? So but like Amanda is always in the room.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
and that's similar to
to a lot
of other
schools. She signs off on everyone who's admitted or not.
Got it. Okay. So if you had to give candidates one tip about the essay portion of the application process, what would it be?
Think before you write, right? I think it's important to engage in thoughtful reflection, thoughtful introspection. And I think it's important for people to have a clear sense of the leader that you aspire to be. It's important that you've identified the gaps that you have, the gaps that you need to close in order to achieve the goals that you're going to outline in your application, right? So there's this aspirational piece, right, where you have to kind of like, this is kind of what I want, and like I like people to kind of swing for the fences a bit. but they need to be in the same stadium though, right? So the goals that you identify, they need to be achievable and plausible based on your prior history, both academic and professional and so on. And then like you've identified the gaps that our MBA program can help you fill, right? So again, it's thoughtful, right? So it's not just like I'm just applying to a bunch of schools, and then the one that get the strongest brand is where I'll go, right? Some people basically that's a process, but I don't think that's the right process. It's like what's the right brand for you? You know, do you have a clear sense of the learning environment that will be best for you? We spoke about differences that cities can make. I mean, New York is a very fast-paced, dynamic environment. So if you feel very strongly, right, that the best environment for you is something that's a lot slower paced, then New York is kind of intense, right? So again, I think just like be intentional about the process, be intentional about everything you do as part of this application process.
That makes sense. Yeah, we talk a lot at ClearAdmit about how candidates they're those candidates that just sort of like apply to the top 10 schools or something, and the reality is that the rankings are not. I mean, I just it's frustrating because I think people they focus really heavily on ranking when they need to focus on what's right for them, and also I think honestly, like I think we advocate at ClearAdmit in the things that we write and the data that we see. We really advocate more of a kind of tiered approach where, it's sort of not worth debating like if schools are really close to one another in terms of their typical rankings and stuff, then it's kind of meaningless. You should really focus on what's the right program for you and where you're going to be comfortable. So yeah, but in any event, I think that's great advice. One question I had is, you mentioned earlier that your interviews are typically conducted by Columbia Business School graduates, and they're done all over the world, in the cities wherever the applicant is applying from in most cases. And I was wondering, what is the interview like, and what advice would you have for someone who's kind of preparing for that interview?
Each interview is different, right? So we give
Right.
the alumni interviewers a broad framework, and then they can get answers in a way that's best for them. So the alumni interviewer is going to do some sort of communication and presentation skills assessment, right? So like how does the person present and talk about goals and so on? Is it clear, concise, and so on? Do you see this person as being representative of the Columbia brand, right? There's a part of the process where we will do a goal assessment, and are the goals achievable, plausible? Does a narrative that the person described make sense? And then there's like a fit assessment, So and there's like, do you want this person a part of your learning team? Do you see this person as someone who's going to contribute to the Columbia community and so on? So that's kind of the framework, and then people can basically just like get to the answers in a way that is right for them. But a good interview report tends to give us context and color for those three things.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's a great opportunity. And when I worked at admissions at Wharton, we used alums as well, and the school doesn't do that anymore. But I think it's always nice to sit down with someone who's actually, been through the program. I think in many cases, it's like that person, could be the candidate's only chance, if they're in a more remote location, to actually connect with someone who, has done the program. So I think it's a great opportunity. The last question I had in terms of like serious admissions questions for you is kind of the $1 million question, and it's about your early decision round versus the kind of general rolling round that you have, a rolling process, I guess I should say. And I wanted to mention that, Columbia is kind of unique among the top business schools in having this sort of early decision round. You look at the other schools that are your peers, whether it's Harvard or Wharton or whoever it may be, they typically just have these round-based, admissions. And you have this early decision process that's unique. And I was just curious to know, like, do you have advice for people that are looking at that round, and maybe just give a quick description of like what it means to apply early decision.
Before I came to Columbia, we had early decision, and the way it was explained to me is that it provided a vehicle for someone who was emotionally connected to Columbia. Like, this is where I really want to be. I've done my due diligence. I want to spend the next 2 years at Columbia. Then it gave that person an option to basically just like put themselves at the front of the line, right? So, and because we have rolling admission, then it means that we are reviewing the applicants who apply earlier, than people who apply later, right? So all things being equal, the earlier you apply, the better your chances, right? So those are two things. From a tactical perspective, the thing I'd also add, right, is that if someone is a candidate whose either the professional profile or their academics are slightly outside what is typical in terms of the range of people that we admit, and the range is very wide. But say you're out of that, right? Then applying early decision gives that person a better chance to be admitted, right? And then the bulk of reapplicants who are successful typically tend to be those who apply early decision. Now that said, the bulk of our applicants apply regular decision, because the majority of applicants want to pretty much have some kind of color or context as to what their financial aid package is going to be and so on. And when you apply early decision, you're applying literally before that process even starts. So you have to make a financial commitment without knowing those answers. So the bulk of folks literally just like know that they apply later on, So we want people to make the choice that's right for them. So the thing I say, and again, like, what is the choice that's right for you? So if I were advising someone whose profile wasn't as strong as the typical person being admitted to Columbia, I'd probably recommend trying to apply earlier in the process. And then if you want to maximize your chances, then if you apply ED, you have the best chance, but then you have to know what the trade-offs are. So it's like, okay, well, if I do that, then I have to put a financial deposit down without knowing what my financial aid is going to be. What is that trade-off worth to you? So I think it's important to know those things and then make the decision that's best for you.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I remember I had a conversation with Amanda at some point, the dean of admissions, and she, had said something to the extent that one of the things that's really cool about the ED candidates that end up matriculating, and joining the community is that they're, like you're saying, they're these kind of gung-ho. They really have done their due diligence and they know. And so it's great to have that part of the student body.
And then before, we're having a conversation about community, right? And then, we haven't done this, like last year or the year before, but we've done this more than once, where we found that the people who are more likely to be the leaders in clubs and the people who actually drive the culture and community at Columbia, they applied ED. So they drive the culture for the school, and we like our culture, because they're just more emotionally invested.
Yep. Makes sense. So I think we've tackled a lot of the big admissions questions that our listeners are all, always dying to know when it comes to these conversations we have with folks like yourself from the very top, business schools in the world. I personally love doing what we're going to do next, which is I have a series of very short lightning round questions. It's part of a larger series that we do at Clear Admit called Real Humans, where we talk to MBA students, MBA graduates, admissions folk, and everyone, and just try to get to know them on a more kind of personal level. Because I think that, when people are applying to business school, it really helps to kind of humanize that process, and for candidates to understand that, Michael Robinson from Columbia, likes hip hop or whatever it might be, just to sort of, so that they don't get caught up in the idea that you're this kind of gatekeeper who is like, has no actual personality, right? So I have a whole bunch of questions, and I wanted to just kind of fire them off at you and see what you have to say. So some of them are really simple. So coffee or tea?
Coffee, no tea.
Okay. All right. Beach or mountains?
Really, neither. I mean, I don't really care. But like San Diego, like weather is my favorite. So like that,
I think like some of your Jamaican roots here are gonna. I mean, people, your relatives and stuff must be like frowning, right? Because I mean, they would have thought you would said beach. No.
No, 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 no. I mean, because I mean, well, we have nice beaches, but like I've never been a beach person. It's like a
Okay. Morning person or night owl?
night owl, night owl.
What's a pet peeve that you have, like about something that people do that kind of bothers you?
People who are like just super transactional.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. Good point. What's a guilty pleasure?
I have a sweet tooth that I can't control. Like I like sweet stuff, and it doesn't have to be expensive stuff. So for example, like those Girl Scout cookies called Samoas. I love those.
Those are very good.
I could eat a whole box of those things. So just in one sitting, which is not good.
Yeah, I understand. Like I can hear you there because I too have a sweet tooth, and I actually, it's not like I need fancy stuff either. I could like eat like a bag of like gummy cola bottles or something. It doesn't matter. Like I just, yeah, every once in a while. So, all right. So your favorite virtue in others?
Kindness, and I want to add some more context. Think about like Mr. Rogers, right? He had this thing where when he's talking to young kids, if you're in trouble, it's like try to find a helper. That's the advice he gave to very young kids, right? So when your life is past, are you going to be described as a helper, right? That is something that is important to me.
Yeah, makes sense. I think there was a documentary about him that recently was put out that was really interesting. I feel like I read that.
Which I haven't seen, but I definitely saw that interview years ago and so on, and it kind of stayed with me.
Okay, so a happy place, like where would we find you, where you're truly kind of in heaven?
I'm a homebody at heart. I like to read a lot, so I just like a quiet place where I can just chill and not do anything.
Okay, all right.
And not read applications.
Right. So, yes. Comfort food.
Well done, spicy Jamaican food. So there's something called oxtail that I like a lot.
Okay. Yes, okay. Yeah, in Philly, where I'm from originally, they had a place called the Jamaican Jerk Hut, which was absolutely fantastic. I have no idea if it's still there, but that was excellent. If you're ever in Philadelphia, what's your go-to cocktail?
I am not really a drinker. I mean, but when I travel, though, I like to drink the local beer in whatever city where I am.
Okay, that's a good answer. Your proudest moment?
When my son Ethan was born.
How old is he?
He's now 14. He is autistic as well, so there's some challenges there. But he is my heart.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah, I have a couple of kids myself, so I know exactly where you're coming from there. Biggest regret?
I'm not really into regrets. I think people try to live now and try to make today better, try to make tomorrow better. I want to kind of go back to a hip hop thing. There's this Jay-Z song that I like, right? It's called You Don't Know. And in the song, he says, like, proudly declares, I will not lose ever, right? Now, that's a line that could be misconstrued, right? So he's not saying that you won't have disappointments or setbacks or challenges, right? But it's a mindset, right? So either you succeed or you learn something that will make you better for the next time.
Got it. Okay. Makes sense. Is there anything you would change about how you were raised? I hope your parents aren't listening, but we're going to ask this question.
No, but one thing though, because my father is in his 70s right now, and men then were a bit different, so you're supposed to provide and so on. And my father was a great provider, but like hugs and kisses, like you didn't really get those things. So I kiss my son a lot, right? So maybe that, but I hug and kiss my father now, so we got to it later on in life.
Good. Yeah, that's a great concept of, there's definitely been, some changes in parenting over time in terms of the male role and stuff. So a superpower that you wish you had?
I wish I could fly.
Okay.
I hate turbulence, so yeah, but I wish I could fly.
Okay. What schools, if any, rejected you when you were looking at business school? And like, how does that how does having been through the process of applying to business school impact the way that you interact with, the prospects who are currently looking at Columbia?
I didn't get rejected when I applied to school, but I applied to very few schools, and I literally, I know for a fact I just got lucky, you know. But the thing though is that because I've done a lot of our diversity work, I spend a lot of time with candidates one on one, and have great conversations. But sometimes it's not a right fit, and so on. So one of the things that I try to do with interactions is that one, I will challenge people. I will be pretty upfront and as transparent as I can be in terms of what I could see being a challenge to the committee and so on, and then we can talk about, okay, well, here's a way to kind of navigate that to put the best foot forward in your process. So the thing is, if you have an interaction with a candidate, right, the goal is not to get an application. The goal should be, how do I help this young person get better?
I totally felt that way when working in admissions before, in the sense that you meet a lot of people, and for some of them, your program's like not necessarily the right move, and it may not even be that business school is the right move. So I think that's really great to hear that you're kind of approaching it from that, angle, as opposed to like, oh no, everyone should apply, kind of thing. So,
but one of the things I want to make clear though is that, like, I don't think you should like shut someone's dream down, right? So in essence, like you said, well, like, here's a challenge, and then, and help that person figure it out. But and then they can decide, okay, well, should I go forward here or not, right? But you want to give them information that's helpful.
Yeah, makes sense. So speaking about that aspect of things, like what's one part of the Columbia admissions process that you would most like to skip if you had to apply again today?
Don't skip anything. It's not that I'm ducking the question, but I am ducking it in a sense where, like, I think the process is helpful, right? So when you go through the steps, it actually forces thoughtful introspection. So you have to kind of go through it. It's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be challenging, and so on. So it's like your mom saying you have to eat your broccoli.
Right, right. I mean, a lot of people that I've done these admissions director kind of chats with, often I feel like it's like the easy out. They're like, oh, I wouldn't want to take a standardized test, because that's like, no one likes taking those tests, I guess. But I even found, personally, that like taking that test was kind of a useful activity, because it sort of made me brush up on skills and that were useful when I got to business school, right? So
yeah, exactly. And if you haven't been in a classroom, right, you haven't really studied anything for like 6 or 7 years and so on, then that helps you.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, well, I'll accept your kind of non-answer. I think it's fair. I do actually, I'm a big believer in the process that is, MBA applications, and it is useful. So, so I have one more question for you. And this is more just for me, because I love asking this question. What's the best thing that you read or watched or listened to recently? Or if you want to share multiple things, that's fine too. I'm always keeping a list here of things to check out myself.
So there's this book by this writer, used to be at the New York Times. His name is Daniel Okrent. It's called The Guarded Gate. And essentially it's about bigotry, eugenics, and there's a law in the 1920s that literally kept Jews, Italians, and Europeans out of America. Essentially, like people from Eastern and Southern Europe, right? That book is fascinating, right? And the drivers behind the movement for eugenics and this anti-immigrant policy, they were some of the most educated people in the country. They went to the most elite schools. Some of them could literally like trace their family all the way back to the Mayflower, right? And one of the things that they said, right, was that like these immigrants, often these Jewish people, they're stealing jobs from the native born, they're costing to taxpayers, they don't respect American values, and they're inclined to be criminals, right?
That doesn't sound at all familiar to me.
Not at all, right? So history tends to rhyme, right? And it literally is fascinating. And then because like standardized tests are like so important to our process, right? But I think a lot of people who do this work don't know that like Carl Brigham, who was a Princeton academic and the creator of the SAT, right? Like literally like he creates this intelligence test, right? And with a specific goal, like this would prove the superiority of the Nordic race. Literally, right? So one can say, well, is the test biased? I don't know, but the person who made it was biased, right? And it's just fascinating. So I read a lot, but it's all linked to like how do we expand opportunity? And the reality is that like when you actually like learn and read and listen to stories, like you find patterns of behavior that have been going on for generations, and there's always this marginalized other that people are afraid of. So I think if we want to have people who are going to be truly inclusive leaders, they have to learn how to appreciate difference, how to leverage difference, and how to manage difference.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I've noted this book, so I'm going to check it out. All right, so I have to ask, do you have any hip hop recommendations? Is there anything recent, like non-90s, that you've been into of late that our listeners could benefit from, from hearing about?
I've long been a fan of writers, poets, lyricists. So of the people under like 40, I mean, Kendrick Lamar is someone who I really like and believe is super talented. And I believe could literally roll with anyone from the 90s or late 80s and be a star then.
Yeah, great choice. And I've always been struck by not only like his ability to kind of craft really, great lyrics or raps, but I find that musically too, it's like he's sort of all over the map, is able to do kind of anything really. I mean, I'm going to blank on the name of the record, but there was one record that had kind of a lot of the sort of jazz influences, and great choice. So listeners, tune in, check out Kendrick Lamar stuff. And Michael, I did want to thank you for making so much time to do this. It's always a pleasure to kind of get a chance to pick the brain of someone in a position like the one that you're in. And I know that our listeners really benefit from learning more about the admissions process at Columbia Business School and even just getting to know you a little bit. So thanks so much for making time for this. And for our listeners, just stay tuned. We have more episodes of the podcast coming and more conversations with people like Michael coming your way. So thank you so much, Michael. And it was a terrific conversation. Enjoyed having you.
Thank you so much for including me. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and to all the listeners, good luck in your process.
All right, we'll catch everyone on the next episode of the Career Minute Podcast.